Fine. So we're continuing. I said if people have something in Tar Shracha they want to talk about, I'll give a chance for just stop for questions. But otherwise, I'm gonna go and just talk about whatever I was in the mood of. Anyone? Could be asking for a friend. Yeah. Okay. Fine. So we discussed in the last time this concept of, this is already going back a few weeks, of what creates a nida midaraisa, and the fact you need hargasha to create a nida midaraisa, and how that kind of creates kind of wacky scenarios nowadays where we're trying to use like our best judgment to figure out, was there hargasha here, was there not a hargasha here, and whatever. Now, okay, let's say a woman is not a nida midaraisa. Let's say there was no hargasha. So is she totally tahor? Well, she's not totally tahor. There's a gzera midrabanan called gzeres ksamim. The chamim were geyser, and any kesem shenimtza v'isha begufa bebegdeha l'shlashon l'chaber. She's tmeya. She's a sur l'bayla. The whole 9 yards, right? The whole zayin akiyim. Everything has to be done. That is the gzera midrabanan called gzeres ksamim. Usually that sounds like a big downer. Here we have this whole idea that in order to become a nida, you have to have hargasha, and it had to be a lot, in order to create the hargasha. Now the chamim were geyser on any kesem, right? So, we're presumably everyone in this room is keeping the rabbanans, right? So what's the difference? Who cares now? The chamim were geyser. What is the difference? There are 3 major kulas when it comes to the nida midrabanan. And whenever you hear these terms, if a Rav asks you about these things, it's because you're dealing with nida midrabanan. These things have no shaykhus to nida midaraisa. So I'll repeat that after I go through them. But that's very clear, and people I think get confused about this point. Whenever you're dealing with one of the following 3 things that we're going to talk about: penny, or shiur gris, size of a penny, davar makabel tuma, or not, or davar she'eino makabel tuma, or whether the wherever the stain was found is colored or not. Those are all characteristics of a nida midarabanan. They're all factors in regards to nida midarabanan. They will not affect the status of a nida midaraisa. So if you're being asked that, it's because you're dealing with nida rabbanon. And if that's not a heter, it's because you're dealing with chashash nida midaraisa, which comes up in certain cases. But always, if you're dealing with nida rabbanon, standard, an isha finds on her beged, common thing, she looks down, she finds a stain. That's called a kesed. That is the world of nida midrabanan almost always, and these are where those factors play a role. The 3 factors, like I just mentioned, is the shiur gris. The shiur gris comes from the times of the Gemara, where basically there was this bug that would constantly leave blood stains everywhere, and basically the Gemara says that if we were going to matama any size blood stain, every woman's going to wake up or be a nida every morning, because these blood stains were so common to be found just overnight on bed sheets and stuff like that. Which is, it's hard for us to fathom living like that, but that's the fact. What the Gemara says, that you're going to be matama every isha. If you say, therefore, the whole Gezer Midrabanan can only start once it's out of the range that can possibly come from this bug. And that was the shiur gris. A gris was a bean that they had in those days. Some cipher draws the shiur, and it matches up with an American penny. That's why we use the shiur of a penny. Chazal did not say an American penny. It takes some real yeshiva history lessons to get that one to make sense. But the shiur of a penny, as I said, just comes from some cipher. Some have a bigger shiur, but that's basically what it is. That's the svar. Now, really, it makes no sense. What kind of din is this? Nowadays, we're only going to be matama the stain if it's bigger than a penny because of bugs that they had in those days. Such a thing. Basically, the way the place keeps saying, I think it's also the Chassam Sofer who says this, that like this: Gezeres Ksamim was a gezerah because of taras. I mean, there's 2 big nafkaminas that Anida has midaraisa. There's the Isser L'Baylo, which is what's negay us, and then there was also a lot of Tumah and Tara halachas that are not negay us. That's negay from Anida. The gezerah of Ksamim, for whatever reason, was a gezerah because of the parsha of Tumah v'Tara. It was a chumrah in Tumah v'Tara. Now, so that Tumah v'Tara doesn't apply anymore nowadays, but we still keep the gezerah. But we only keep it as it was Masukah, which is in the times of Tumah v'Tara. Even though nowadays we don't have it anymore, we don't have the whole time for the gezerah. We're only keeping it up to what it was in those days, so we retain the kula of a gris, even though it doesn't make any sense nowadays. So the shiur of the nida midrabanan has to be the size of a penny. The Chassam Sofer is of the opinion that the whole stain just needs to be bigger than a penny. What I mean to say is that when a woman has discharge from a smokum, it's not only blood. It can be other things as well that come out from the body, tissue, mucus, whatever it is, and it can make for a picture that's not pretty, and it's not just straight blood. So it's not. So the Chavas Das is of the opinion that as long as the stain, the whole stain, everything being considered is bigger than a penny, that's enough to be matame, because presumably his svara being that bug left one thing big the size of a penny. That's everything that came out. There's no indication that only the blood, and therefore he says the entire stain has to be bigger than a penny. Rav Moshe actually says you should be machmir, like the Chavas Das. Thankfully, we are not makbid on this. And the way the standard, I think the way everyone goes, as far as I know, is that the red part of the stain, the blood, has to be bigger than a penny. And so the Masarian person was to be very makel about this. They'll cut it. I've had shilos before that have come to me that they're clearly bigger than a penny. It looks like the red is bigger than a penny. And I've gone to the Devitzin in a row with it, or sent someone to Devitzin in a row, and he's like, I understand what the shilo is, even like, why did he waste your time and come here? There's come out nothing here. So this doesn't count, that doesn't count. It's got. The point is, it has to be like solid blood, the size of a penny. A lot of times, the nature of these stains, their teva is that they get spread out, and there's like, it's not like solid. Unless it's that, you should always bring it in to Rav, because they can be very, very makel about it. That's the first thing Nidam Rabbanan needs. The second thing is mentioned before, it has to be on a dover hamakabel tumah. Again, the same svar is brought. Shitara says is that the whole gezerah is atu the tumah, and it's only if it was found on a dover makabel tumah, it should be negay. Even though it's negay on many other things. Now she's a nida, everything she touches can have tumah v'tara. But wherever the kesem was found, that's the gezerah made. It's a gemara. Classic examples of things that are davar she'ein makabel tumah that we come across nowadays. Anything disposable. Most things disposable. I shouldn't say anything, but disposable things are very often considered davar she'ein makabel tumah. There's different backs and forths about it. Rav Moshe has a tshuva about toilet paper, where he said toilet paper is not considered a davar hamakabel tumah. It's considered davar she'ein makabel tumah, even though the Mishnah lists paper as something that's a makabel tumah. Rav Moshe said in those days paper was very valuable. They kept it. It wasn't like we have it nowadays. As nowadays, the way we treat paper and especially toilet paper, he says, it's considered a davar she'ein makabel tumah. There's some like Masara that Rav Moshe told people in private that a ben Torah maybe should be makbid on it. Therefore, some are maybe makbid to consider toilet paper a davar makabel tumah and Eretz Yisrael. Supposedly they're makbid. Legend being that
these so-called people who say Rav Moshe said that?
I don't know. I don't do it, but I don't trust them. But supposedly the toilet paper is colored in Eretz Yisrael for this reason. If you ever wondered why they have colored toilet paper, supposedly. What? Every other one. Is that how it is, or yeah?
Pink, white.
I guess they're hoping. They figure if they can make it a 50-50 chance, it's pretty good. Imagine cut down 50% of Charlotte. Anyway, that's the other that Darshan Kabbalah Tumas are saying disposable things. My Hara circle holds to that pads are Davar she'ein makabel tumah as well, because they're disposable. That's a big kula. Not everyone agrees with that, but it helps. You don't have any shilas of nidar rabbanan because that sounds like a good kula to be samech on. But to each their own. The argument I think being against it is that they become a chubur lebeged when they have sticky stuff on it that attaches it to the begadim. And maybe they're more substantial than your standard disposable thing. So others want to argue. What?
It still gets thrown out.
Yeah, it's not that there's a svara that anything that's disposable automatically becomes davar she'ein makabel tumah. It's that things that are disposable are not considered chashuv. So maybe this is considered chashuv. I don't know. I think it makes sense to me. I'm good with it. I have no problem being makel on it. The other manifestations of this kula are the toilet bowl, chobel karka. Remember, I mentioned in Tilas Yadayim thing after davening. I said that I was talking about sinks, whether sinks are considered a kli that afterwards became mechuber l'karka, or whether it's considered mechuber l'karka all along. And I said because the sink was made to attach to a wall, it's considered mechuber l'karka all along. That actually created a chumrah by Netilas Yadayim, that you can't dunk your hands in it, even like the shita of the Rif. But I mentioned then that you better go with that shita because otherwise you're going to have a problem in Hilchos Nida. I meant this because the reason why I consider the toilet bowl to be mechuber l'karka, not a davar makabel tumah, is because even though it was fashioned as a kli, outside of the karka, but since it was made with the intent all along to be mechaber l'karka, it's considered mechuber l'karka and not makabel tumah, and therefore any stain that's found on it is considered on a davar she'eino makabel tumah, and you're good to go. Otherwise, it would be pretty annoying. I mean, you'd have a lot of shilas. If not for that, we are makel also on the water in the toilet. That the water in the toilet is considered davar she'eino makabel tumah. It's true some Yitzchak about it. There's stickle shver, but
don't most places hold you shouldn't look in for that reason?
I don't think most. I think some maybe do because it's a shaila. I'm makel about the water in the toilet. Yitzchak says you can be makel. There's shitas you can be samech on by ksomim midrabanan. The Mesorah by ksomim is to be makel. And there's shitas to be samech on that the water in the toilet is considered a davar she'eino makabel tumah, and therefore is okay. It's a whole shiloh in the sugyas and mikvahs. It's not for now. It's a little too broad for now. But there are shitas to rely on, and like I said, I would personally rely on it. The reason not to is either because you don't consider the water in the toilet to be a davar. You consider that to be a davar makabel tumah. The other reason some of machmir is because even if the water in the toilet is a davar makabel tumah, but the mereglayim, the urine, is a davar makabel tumah. And if the dam is found in the mereglayim, then that's found in a davar makabel tumah. So that's like Sijatara says, you go with the roy. If it's kama batal, when it hits the water, it becomes batal.
Shika, like by regular mikvah.
What you mean hashaka?
Yeah. That it's like
no, hashaka won't work here. You need our boy himself for hashaka. You need 40.
Wherever the water goes to, once it touches it, it becomes part of
Yeah, but you need a kosher mikvah. You need fresh.
That concept, the mirror line touches the regular water.
Yeah.
Now it's not mirror line anymore. It's already.
That's bit though.
Yeah.
That's kama batal. Yeah, that's what the Sijatara says. Yeah.
Isn't this also the water is disposable? Like you're throwing out the water, it's.
That wouldn't work for water. No, water's not considered. Water doesn't. No, that's for kalim. That's for something not to be considered kalim. Water is, by its nature, a davar makabel tumah. Water in your cup is a davar makabel tumah. Even though you're technically going to dispose of it, I guess, in a second, it is considered a davar makabel tumah. Once it goes into the ground, it becomes like mechuber l'karka, becomes a mikvah. Then it becomes tar and is not makabel tumah. And the question is, how much it needs to gain that status. I hear the point you're making. That's as far in kalim. When material needs to be, certain materials need to become a kli in order to be makabel tumah, they're not considered kalim because they're disposable. Water is by its nature a davar makabel tumah, even without being a kli. Yeah, you have to keep your, I guess, toes on. Right? Women need to keep their toes on. If they it's not the word expression, like for whatever. If they when they do a urine test, then you don't have the water to be mevatel it. Then it would be makabel, and any dam that's found in there could make her need them darbona. I once got a call about this one when I was like, well, like how did you realize to differentiate between? I don't think she actually realized. I think she was just. Whatever. Maybe she always called about this, but anyway, it does make a difference if it would be found in something like that. And then the only heter to make her not a midarbanan would be to don that it wasn't a gris, it wasn't the size of a penny. That's very hard to mashar here. But if it's mamish a tiny amount, you'd assume it wasn't. But that would be the heter, the not heter there. And the third kula, as mentioned, is that it has to be on white. The idea being is that Chazal basically gave this kula that anytime there's any color there, it could mess with the color you're looking at, and you think it looks like blood, but it's not really blood. It's some other discharge, and mamela their mako. But it's a practical story. It's not like Xeris Akosov that if it went on color, like it becomes damtar. It's just the fact you might not be able to see it. The reason it makes a difference is because, let's say, I heard once a kula that to me doesn't really make sense, that if let's say a woman was wearing colored underwear and it went through and went onto white sheets, since it went through something colored, even though now it's red, it's bigger than a penny, and it should be problematic. But since it went through colored, now you can be makel. That's just that sounds like.
Does that not get filtered out something else?
No, that wouldn't be. I think that would be a very big chiddush. Number one, you need a riot to say that, but that's not how I understood at least the head to this Rav was saying. He was just saying that since the assumption is it landed on something and was tar, so the psak then would have been tar. So now that it's soaked through, it remains tar. It's not a din that it becomes tahar when it hits on the colored. It's that if you can't see it. What?
It's not a din how it's found. It's found in white.
It's a din in how it's found, right? Yeah, I'm saying. But he was saying that had you looked at it then, meaning I'm saying it's a din in how it's found. I'm agreeing, but he's saying no, it's a din. There's like a sock. Once it hits something, it becomes tar. If it was uncolored and you washed, let's say you washed it out, and you see it's clearly blood, you wouldn't be able to matar then. It's just you're allowed to leave it in there and say that's it, and you don't have to be a detective and go any further. Those are the three big kulas by nidim d'Rabbanan, and those three things all, like I said, they're only kulas by nidim d'Rabbanan. Once you're dealing with deraisa, you're going to be out on any of these things. So that's why a lot of anything that has a chashash deraisa, you're no longer going to be asking yourself, is it bigger than a penny, or anything like that, or was it on a davar she'en makabel tuma, or was it colored? There's a major shiloh like this. It's a little too complicated, a little too involved right now. I'll leave it. There are three important exceptions. There's basically one exception, but there are three major nafkaminos to this klal, to all the klalim have said. The klalim are basically that hargasha creates a nidud d'oraisa, hargasha is potentially nidud d'Rabbanan. There are kulas by nidud d'Rabbanan, the three things I just mentioned, and the only thing basically that creates a nidud d'oraisa is this active hargasha, which nowadays only comes if a woman basically gets her period or has like a lot of blood, that we call it with this concept called Riyah Meruba. The idea being that the Gemara says is that there's a concept called argishev lavadaitik, that when an isha, that when there's something going on that would otherwise make her unable to tell if there was a hargasha, then we name on that there was an hargasha she did not realize. And the Rambam says it's chazaka that such a dam is baba hargasha. That when we don't have them, a woman would not know she had hargasha and found dam at that time. The muchzaka says that the dam was baba hargasha and were matam her. And the examples of this are basically when things physically are going on around Isamakum that are causing that she would not be able to tell if there's a hargasha. That creates this kshash nidud d'oraisa, and that taka puts on her the chumras of d'oraisa. And the big nafkamina being that you lose the three kulas I just said a second ago. So we don't care anymore about the size. The size of a penny doesn't matter. We don't care the color it's on. We don't care if it's a davar or makabel tuma. We're now going to be machmer about all those stuff. The classic examples of this stuff are like bedikas. Is a classic example of it. The act of doing the bedika would makes it that an isha would not tell if there's hargasha, and that's why bedikas are so klummer. That's why we don't care about the size, right? So people are confused. Why in that shiloh looking if it's a penny and this any little bit is matama? The reason being, once it's a bedika, now it loses that kula of d'Rabbanan. It has the chshashas and the chumas of d'oraisa, and any little bit is going to be matama. Another example, another nafkamina where this comes up is tashmish. The act of tashmish would mask the hargasha, and she could not feel it, and therefore again it would knock you out of the kulas of the d'Rabbanan, create the chumras of d'oraisa, and we don't care now, right? So any dam.
What's the reason for the bedika again?
Is that the fact that she would not be able to tell if there was hargasha, because the act of doing a bedika masks it, and she won't know now if there was a bedika. So now we're chayshesh that there was, and the Ram says it's even a muchzakas, that the dam is baba hargasha. It's hard nowadays. It's a little tricky nowadays because women never feel a hargasha. So why are we thinking that second pumped? She was chayshesh for hargasha that second. It is a little bit tricky, but that's what we're left with as far as halacha is concerned. So it's very hard to go against that, because once you can start going against that, you're going to end up in places that might end up being much more chomer than this. But if you start making the cheshbonos and halacha, but that's a little bit beyond right now. But this is what the standard way of approaching it is that the bedika, because physically you couldn't tell, mimelu you're chayshish for hargasha, now you're chayshish for nidud d'oraisa, and you don't have the kulas. And the same thing is true by tashmish, and therefore any dam found during tashmish can create a problem. Now, tashmish is more tricky because you don't know when the dam was found very often, right? Bedikas it's on the bedika, so that's it. You're out. But in tashmish, afterwards, when did it come, is often tricky. So it's something you should speak to Rav about it. It's a complex inyan, how we cheshbon that. And the other major nafkamina with this is doctoral procedures. Everyone should just be aware that when sometimes you go to an OB and he does something that involves something that is similar to a bedikal experience, that it could create any dam that's found there could create a chash nida midraisa and could be problematic. In terms of that, you don't have like I said, you don't have the coolers of Nidra Rabban anymore. So it doesn't matter that the gloves were disposable. You're not going to be mekel if it's a chash nida midraisa. Usually in these cases we could get out of the shilas, but you want to. The best practice is not to look and don't ask, and just, ignorance is bliss. You're not. There's a mistake some people make. They think you're mechuyev to be looking once something was done. You don't have to look. Don't look. Once you see something, you can't ignore it. But there's no chiyuv bedika. You can on a cheskes tara. The only time maybe, and this is not even so partial, but when you do a bedika during zayin akiyim, then you have to look. Then maybe there's a chiyuv part of the sphere of zayin akiyim. It creates a chiyuv that you have to look at the bedika. Certainly the bedikas that you're supposed to be doing. But anytime maybe you do a bedika, maybe you have to look. That's even a maybe. But the rest of the month there is no chiyuv to be looking. So don't look. As always best say, so looking is only going to make problems for yourself. Okay. Hold it here.
What's with like a white pad during the Shovivim?
What's with wearing it?
Are you allowed to or not?
I think so, yes. Some Rabbanim frown upon it. I don't like to go there 100% lechachila because, in all honesty,
In Eretz Yisrael, he was very mocked that you should have it up.
you should. Yeah, I think it's good.
He's a very good.
I would never be mocked, but not to just because practically, some women don't like it, so why am I telling it? But if a woman's worried about it, for sure, l'chachila, she could wear it. Rabbi Sokol, who I've mentioned many times, I learned my halachas by. He held that that the minhag was wearing white underwear. There was no minhag to wear a white pad, So if you want, it's all minhag. The wearing white during Zayin Akiyim is a minhag, and the reason for the minhag is because the Torah says v'safrlo. Right? The Torah says Zayin Akiyim is a sphere. It's supposed to be counting. So how do you count? We don't count on Yom Echel Zayin Akiyim. And the Mefarshim explain, we count by being aware of whether or not she's seeing dam or not. So how is she more aware during Zayin Akiyim than she is any other time during the month? So number one is the bedikas. And number two, the wearing white. That's the minhag. Wearing white is a.
They were just how dirty it gets. This is how you wait. They see how dirty I'm there.
No, I mean that. Thank you. I'll have to edit out 22:45 to 23. Yes.
Find down there on the side of the on a pad. That's a problem.
It's in the same halachas as any time. It will not be a problem. As far as I'm concerned, even if it's bigger than a penny, it will not be a problem. It will only become a problem if it becomes so much that it might be a new period. Sometimes, usually that happens if something's going on. Switch to birth control or something. Something happened that caused that. Usually to get a whole new period. But no, the halachas of Zayin Akiyim, that's another important thing that people don't. Zayin Akiyim is not really more chomer than the rest of the month. The same thing that will make her need to the rest of the month is going to make her need during Zayin Akiyim. The chomer of Zayin Akiyim is just that you're supposed to be more aware of what's happening. However, you are more aware of what's happening. The way we do it, like I said, is Aydei B'dikas, and by wearing white. But the minhag is white, just to become more aware. So personally, white. Why does it matter if it's a white baguette or a white pad? But there are those who say no. The minhag is a white baguette. I spoke to other chashuv rabbanim who said they don't see any reason why mechtesi that it's a white baguette. L'chachila. If anyone calls me, they want to wear that for whatever reason she wants to wear the pad. Go ahead, no problem. Just don't like. Like I said, some of them don't like it anyway, so it's not whatever. That's a different story. You mind of something else? Yeah, okay. I'll hold it here. Shkaya.